Hi, thanks for joining the channel today. Today I'm going to be talking about gardening hacks and trends, what works, what doesn't. I've got 12 different ones I'm going to be talking about today. And, especially if you're a new gardener or just, sometimes you'll see stuff, you think, hey, does that work? Does it not work? And some stuff I'm going to get into a little bit more, and I might not have actually bought it, but some stuff you can use common sense and say, that's not going to work. And on my first one, it's going to be on electroculture. And this came out, I think, last fall, and kind of came on some of the bigger channels. Now, I like the channels that I saw it on. I still watch them, so this isn't an indictment if you believe in electroculture or not. But I tend to be a skeptic in everything that I do. And when I look at electroculture, and that is where they take little copper wires and turn it in kind of a corkscrew way. And supposedly it comes and it brings all the energy from around and puts it into the ground. And it's supposed to help with fertilizer, it's supposed to help with bugs, it makes plants healthier, it makes them produce more. And really there's no scientific basis to it whatsoever. The only basis they kind of had about it was there was one deal done in Russia in which they had some electric wires that they're shooting electricity through, and they showed some improvement on plant health or whatever, but I don't think it's peer reviewed. It didn't really ever take off. And like I say, it was actually running electricity through the wires. This other stuff, there's no electricity in it. They're just sticking stuff in the deal. It's kind of based on a lot of kind of mysticism that there's energy all around. You can pull that energy in. So if you feel like doing it and you make it, and you think it's going to make you feel better, fine, you can do it. It's just not going to help you any. I don't think there's any part of people trying to really scam anybody. I think the people that have done it or talked about it, I think they believe in it. But one thing that you'll find out, if you kind of believe in something, you'll make it work, even if it doesn't. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on in some other things, but because I'm going to talk, I think, two other of my talks are on different additives to the soil and why people think they work, and even though they really don't. So electroculture, it was big for a while. I don't even see a need to try it, because, and a lot of people say, well, you're not open-minded enough. Well, no, I'm not gullible enough to believe it's what it is. So, like I say, it's one of them, I guess it's harmless, but you're supposed to put these little electric wire deals every 3 foot. And, one plant will look really good. And, when you go down through I one time planted a sun gold on one end of a row, went down 50 foot, had other tomato plants, and at the end of the row I planted another sun gold. One sun gold did terrible, did not grow good, did not produce much. The one on the other end of the row did fantastic. Made a lot of tomatoes, big healthy plant. It's on the same row. I've grown corn where you see a row, you'd be going really good, and all of a sudden the stuff wouldn't look good, and they start looking bad again, or turn looking good again. I've had bean plants. You have a bean plant there, and one of them will have 12 different pods on it of green beans. You pick them all and think, boy, that's really good. You go to the next plant right beside it, it's only got 2 pods on it. There's a lot of variability to it. So, if you're going to do that, you really have to have a control. You have to do several plants. I mean, I'm talking 25, 30 plants of the control group, 25, 30 plants of the other, just to make it significant if you see any differences. So, and most people, it's not going to go to that. Second thing I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to kind of reach back to the early 2000s. And this was as seen on TV. Is a product called Topsy Turvy, and basically it was a tomato planter, and I actually went back and watched the commercial on YouTube. Somebody had it. I don't think the company's in business anymore, but basically you have there's a plastic container and vinyl plastic, and then you turn it, you plant the tomato upside down, and you hang the plant up, and you grow the plant down. Now, it was on a little rack that you put it on that they had, and one thing they said that the squirrels can't get to it because it's off the ground, bugs can't get to it because apparently squirrels can't jump and climb, and apparently bugs can't fly and climb. But because you're not very high off the ground, if you start this high and you got a bag that's this big and then you're going to grow 3 feet down, you're almost touching the ground before it's over with. But it never does touch the ground because plants don't want to grow down. The other thing that they were saying, the main thing they said was, we're going to work, it's a revolutionary idea, we're going to work against, we're going to make gravity work for us instead of against us, because the nutrients in the stem will go down and the gravity will pull it down, and you'll get the gravity, you'll get more nutrients into the leaves. Well, no plant likes to grow upside down. So what happens is it goes down and it kind of make a U-shape and grow back up. So that's one problem. But the main problem is you had to water it from the top. And you had to make sure that you watered enough that, you know, it got to the bottom. So you had to let water run out the bottom. And this wasn't clear water. This was water that went through all that soil that you had, potting mix, whatever, and it flashed on the leaves. One thing about growing tomatoes is you don't want to get the leaves wet, and that's what these did. So most of the plants died. Now I'm going to tell on these things work, things don't work, things are suspect. I'm not sure if it works or not, maybe. And toxic. Well, to me, this one's toxic because the plants died for the most part. I mean, they just didn't do good. And you're just going to kill that plant. Now, it's not anything really bad. I mean, if you ever see one, you can sometimes pick them up. It was funny, though, on the commercial, for 2 easy payments of $19.95, you can have a topsy-turvy with the deal and all that. And I remember seeing it, and even I looked at it and said, that ain't going to work. But I did go out and was at Big Lots, one of those clearance places, and I went and looked, and lo and behold, about 3 or 4 years later, they had a topsy-turvy for the low, low price of $1.99. And then I was reading in the comments sections that the 99-cent store also had them. So it went from being $40 for the box all the way down to $1. So that's one reason I think they're out of business. But they probably made a bunch of those. They sold a bunch of them. A bunch of people tried it. I even seen one reviewer, they tried it. They were kind of liking it. And they said, I'll make whenever I harvest it, I'll make another video. I looked through all his videos. He'd make another one. Because people don't like to be taken. They don't like to try something and say it didn't work. I do it on my channel. I try to do that, but even you don't like to say you got took. You don't like to say, I tried something that didn't work. You know, I got snookered. Number 3, the green stalk. These are fairly recent. They've been out for 3 or 4 years, I believe. And they're a vertical planter. And you got 5 different pockets, and you've got 5 different layers, and they get up about 4.5 foot tall. You can buy the wheels on it, you can buy a little deal, and the theory behind this is you plant each one of the pockets, you water from the top, and it runs down to each one of these different pockets. Now, do they work? Yeah. I would actually have thought about buying one on a couple of occasions. They're kind of expensive. I think they're around $150 or so regular price if they're not on sale. But I like the idea. Now, a couple of problems you may have with them is if you are in a high wind area. We're on the coast or close to the coast, so we do get hurricanes, and you get 90 mile an hour wind, you got something that's vertical sticking up like that, it could blow over. The other thing is you do have to have them level. If you have it nice and level for the watering to work right. They do. If I was going to do it, I wouldn't put it on wheels, because if you notice my area, there's no way to wheel anything anywhere. So I would actually buy the little turntable and just turn it that way, because once you put it in place, I think it's going to stay there. But for balcony gardeners, for all those type of people, I think they work really well. And I think that if you're going to try to grow micro tomatoes, if you're going to be growing, lettuces, spinach, some peppers, if they got smaller pepper plants, those kind of things, I think they work really well on. And you get a lot of different plants, strawberries. I think that's why I was going to plant with strawberries. I think that they could work well. They have a small footprint, so I think that's a win. I think that's a good one to get. You have to decide if it's economical, but it does work. Number 4, and I'm going to say raised beds, and to kind of give you, raised beds have not been around forever like some people probably think. When I was growing up, no one grew vegetables in raised beds that I knew of. When I went to college, raised beds just wasn't something people did. But right after I graduated from college, some people started using raised beds. The first thing they used was railroad ties. And they built the railroad ties because they were 8 to 10 foot long, and you cut them in half and make the ends, and it worked, but then no one really thought at the time that all the different chemicals that was in railroad ties. And after people started thinking about that, they thought that's probably not a good idea. We probably need to grow something else. So they went to the treated lumber, and treated lumber was, The old treated lumber had arsenic in it, but the newer stuff now has copper, which is not near as bad. So some people do that. Some people will use just regular pine that's untreated. It just doesn't last very long when you do that. It's 2 or 3 years. Where I'm at, maybe 4 for somewhere else. And then one thing you could use was the cement blocks. Well, way over there won't shit, but you know, it's cement blocks that you get. You got the hose in the middle, 2 hoses in the middle. We used to call them haydock blocks, but they're not made out of the haydock anymore. But you put those up with the hose pointing up, and they make a good raised bed. They don't look good, but they do make it a separate raised bed, and they're fairly cheap to make. But now they've got the Vigo beds, the Birdie beds, where you got the corrugated metal. Do they work? Yeah. They're kind of expensive, but they do seem to last a long time. One thing I will caution on them is you're going to spend more money to fill those things up than you are buying the beds. So just realize that up front. It can be very expensive. I would use more topsoil than most people do because your beds are going to drain very well, and they may drain too well. You will have to water a raised bed more often, but raised beds are really good. In fact, they limit you in the amount of space that you have to garden in. If you start with 4 8 by 4 raised beds, that's less than 150 square foot of surface area. If you go up there and say, I'm gonna make me a 30 by 30 garden in the backyard, that's 900 square feet. A lot more. You're gonna need a lot more equipment, and you can get overwhelmed very easily because a lot of times you'll take a section of your yard and you'll plow that up, you'll till it up, and it just gets away from you. So I think raised beds are a great thing to start out with, even better than containers because it's just easier. So that is something that works. If you want to spend the money, you think it's economical, go for it, because I think that they're a good thing. The thing about the some of the beds, some of them are taller. The taller you get it, the more costly it's going to be to fill them up, but the less bending over you have to do. And as you get older, bending over is going to be a problem. Number 5, this is kind of supplements that you see. One of them is Super Thrive. It's in every market stores, it's in Tractor Supply, it's in the big box stores, it's in Walmart. It came out in the 1940s. It was disapproved. It proved it didn't work in the 1950s. It promotes itself as being vitamins for your plants. Well, your plants can't take up vitamins. Sorry, they make vitamins, they cannot take it up. It won't fit through the walls of the root hairs. They take up individual elements such as copper, calcium, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. In fact, phosphorus is bad because it binds with other things and it gets too big, so it won't go into the root hair. So you have to find out, is it available for the plant to take up? Because if it's not free floating, the plant can't take it up. So it can't take up vitamins. Another thing that happened, and I'm going to talk a little bit on this, I'm still saying it's number 5, is Epsom salt. Now, Epsom salt is a fertilizer. By the way, Super Thrive doesn't work. Epsom salt, and that's in my opinion, Epsom salt is a good fertilizer if you need magnesium. But what it was really pushed for is blossom end rot on tomatoes. And that's where the bottom of the tomato starts a black spot. It slowly rots the whole tomato after it gets so big. And the problem is you don't have enough calcium in the plant is what causes it. Now, why you don't have enough calcium in the plant is kind of the issue. So used to, people would go to the store, go to Walmart, go to the feed store, and they ask, what do I put? I got blossom end rot. And they say, put down Epsom salt. You put down Epsom salt once a week, 30 days later, it's going to go away. It's going to treat it, it's going to go away. So they take the Epsom salt, they pour it on the plants, and I know one guy that did this. He went to the store, he had a vlog, and he put it in the garden bed. 30 days later, cleared up the blossom end rot. So that stuff works. So the next year, he does the same thing. He starts getting blossom end rot. He puts on the magnesium, the Epsom salt, compost. The blossom end rot goes away after 30 days. Well, the third year, he looks at it. He's a confirmed believer in it. He's done it 2 years in a row. I know the stuff works. I've done it. Well, the third year, he runs out of Epsom salt. He starts getting some of the blossom end rot. He wants to go to the store to buy it. He gets busy with work. He never gets out to buy the Epsom salt. But you know what? 30 days later, the blossom end rot ran away. It had nothing to do with the Epsom salt, but it looked like it did. It looked good. And that's where we get into trouble with some of these additives is we will do it and it looks like it works. We want it to work because we bought that product. And we put that product out and it said it's, and they promised the world, they promised it's to make stuff grow. It's got all these different stuff in them. But my problem is, does your soil need that extra stuff? Do you have all the micronutrients that you have? If you do, that stuff's not gonna help. So on this one, I'm saying it doesn't work for what it was intended to. Now, if you have a magnesium deficiency in your containers or something like that, or even magnesium deficiency in your soil, Epsom salt is a very cheap, a very good, readily available fertilizer that you can put down on your plants to solve that problem. But if you put too much magnesium down, it's going to tie up calcium. It's going to make blossom end rot worse. So that's kind of the ironic thing is what people was doing had the capacity to make it worse. So the other, number 6, is compost tea. I don't hear as much about it anymore, but in the 90s that was big. You know, there's a guy here in Texas, man, everything could be solved with compost tea. Basically, you take compost, you put it in a 5-gallon bucket, you take an aerator from like a fish tank, you put the air stone in it, because you want aerobic bacteria growing in that stuff. And the anaerobic bacteria can't survive with the air stone, so you get all this good mixture, all these good bacteria is growing after about a month or so. And then you take that and you would put it on your plants. And it would put bacteria on the leaves to keep diseases away. But my problem, because I'm a skeptic, I'm saying, but once you put the magnesium, once you put the compost tea on the leaves and it dries, all those bacteria die. So how does that help? And the second part of it is you put this, compost tea will help add minerals to your soil. Well, yeah, kind of, but if you were taking that compost and put it in your flower bed or your planting bed, it would have added nutrients too. And you cannot make more nutrients by putting it in water. No matter how much air, how much bacteria is, it's not going to do it. Now, it could possibly make the phosphorus or something like that more readily available, but your nitrogen is probably going to leave if because it likes to go back in the atmosphere. If you got it in a water solution, it's going to go up in the air. So, people really pushed it. A lot of people believed in it. I think it's a lot of trouble. You're having to run a pump all the time. It could cost you some money there. I just don't see how it's ever going to work. And I don't know any of the AgriLife people or any of the land-grant universities that ever pushed it. It was just different authors that pushed it and really didn't have, you'd always have the analytical people say, well, we tried it, and how do you say that word? Personal testimonies. And again, those people don't have control groups most of the time. So they don't know if it worked or not. Because people say, well, 1 year, it worked great. I never had so many tomatoes before until I did this. And I did this, and I got all kinds of tomatoes. But my second year of gardening, I had one of the best tomato crops ever. I do a way better job of planting tomatoes now. But that 1 year, they were phenomenal. So do you know it was that year or not? It might be that, you had 3 or 4 bad years, and this year is just a really good year for tomatoes. It didn't have anything to do with the new things that you did. So you have to do it in the same year, same time, same location, and see, can you replicate that over a number of years? Is it really helping or not? And you have to have that control group, or it really doesn't mean anything. Because I've seen people say, well, last year I tried it, and this year all my plants are doing so much better. But if you don't have a control group, you don't know that. Right now, there's rice farmers in Jefferson County, where I work. They're trying to figure out, they have 25% less harvest on rice than they expect. Now, rice farmers down here are just rice. That's all they farm. They might farm crawfish too, if you want to call that as a crop. But the only crop that they grow, as far as a grain crop, is rice. And one guy said he was getting 25. He talked to a friend of his. He was getting 25% less harvest than they expected. They call people in Louisiana that's got 25% less. That's a big deal, trying to figure it out. And there are farmers that do this for a living, and their livelihood is based on it, and they're trying to figure out what went wrong. And it could just be, they're thinking maybe seeds, maybe something else. It could just be a new disease. It could be, they just don't know. They're trying to figure that out. So you'll see the same thing. That's why you got to compare stuff in the same year. Number 7, This is something that came fairly new. I know I tried it a couple of 3 years ago, and I've seen some more stuff come out on it. And this is a do-it-yourself herbicide. You know, and I like do-it-yourself stuff. I do it myself. Potting mix, seeding mix, all that stuff. But this is do-it-yourself herbicide. And basically, we're going to take soap, Dawn dishwashing soap. That's supposedly the best. Vinegar, okay, unless you got rid of acidic soils, that's not bad. And then salt. Who in their right mind wants to put salt on the garden? Okay, and he blames it using non-toxic chemicals. I'm sure he's talking about glyphosate. I hate to tell the man, I didn't write comment. It's not my channel, so I don't, didn't leave anything there. But glyphosate breaks down. You can plant stuff behind blast like glyphosate in 3 to 5 days. It breaks down, okay? Salt, it don't break down. You have sodium, you have chloride. It's going to be there. We had a storm surge that happened after Hurricane Ike. Get my hurricanes mixed up. 52% of the county went under the storm surge. I drove around and looked at it. You had dead grass everywhere. Did a really good job of killing everything, except for Bermuda grass. We had a Bermuda grass field that was it stood out because about 150, 200 acres, maybe 300 acres of Bermuda grass field. It was kind of L-shaped. You're driving down, everything's dead. Whoop, there's some Bermuda grass. And it did hurt the production of the Bermuda grass because it didn't look like, it looked great, but it really, they talked to farmer ladies, yeah, it didn't really produce like it should have. But, and McCartney Rose is another one that kind of popped up. But the people from LSU came out, and they did a lot better than people from A&M. Not knocking A&M, they just stopped by the coast. And they said, a couple things going to happen. Said, it's not all bad news. We know everything's salted out, but this is a natural occurrence. It happens all the time. And they said, you're going to have a really good Bermuda grass fields, Bermuda grass pastures. Everything's going to turn to common Bermuda grass for a couple, 3 years, and it's going to revert back. So that's the good, the good thing. He said they've done research, and what they found out that salt, and they're talking about NaCl, is very mobile in the soil, both vertically and horizontally. They say they would take a field, and you had this field here, and there'd be a hot spot here, hot spot there, hot spot there. And they would take I think they did either every week or once a month, probably every week. And they noticed that these hot spots would shift. Some would shift uphill, some would shift downhill, and you have to remember, we're talking about less than 1% slope, but they would move around. So I'm thinking this guy was talking about putting these on his, down his pathways. He said it would take a year for anything to grow there, but it's non-toxic. And I'm going, that salt's going to move. It's going to move sideways. It's going to move underneath his raised beds. And he might not even realize it, but it could reduce, because if those roots start hitting that salt, if they're salt sensitive, something like blueberries, blackberries, they're sensitive to salt, it's going to kill them, or it's going to really reduce. It's going to reduce, the production, and that salt can also move up. So, don't put salt in your garden. I mean, to me, that's the toxic one. That's the one. Just don't use it. If you want to try it with just a Dawn dish soap and the vinegar, I tried it once. I tried the glyphosate because I was doing around my fruit trees. You got to be really careful with glyphosate. It is deadly to plants. It's not that toxic to people, despite what a lot of lawyers are saying. And it's not toxic to eat the food. It's toxic to spray it. So just, you don't want stuff on you. But surprisingly, the DL or DH, how they rank toxicity, I did on Hoss Tools. He was talking about that. He said that I think it's DL or DH, one of those two. It's a death rate, 50%, and for salt, it's 4 ounces. For glyphosate, it's 8 ounces. So technically, salt's more toxic. And we're not talking about long-term cancer and all that type of stuff. But anyway, I'm not going to get on that on glyphosate. If you don't want to plant glyphosate in your garden, I understand. I rarely use it unless I have to. But anyway, number 8. Probably going to get some hate on that one. But number 8, and this is the Dwarf Tomato Project. Now, how would you like to be able to grow tomatoes and have all the different shapes, sizes, color tomatoes, and grow it in half, and grow it and only be half as tall? In other words, shrink it down and be able to where you can grow it. You probably can't see it in a 5-gallon bucket. All right, just a regular 5-gallon bucket.
You can see what?
Like this that you get, and you can grow a tomato plant in it. Well, Dr. Craig LeHoullier got together and put in a dwarf tomato project, because what he found was a lot of people are now wanting to grow in urban gardens, and all they got is 5-gallon buckets or small areas and things. And he wrote a book called Epic Tomatoes. Very good book. I like it. Does it work? You bet it does. I think it's one of the best things that happened to tomatoes since they realized that hybrids taste so much better than the store-bought tomatoes back in the 70s and stuff, and taste wasn't really even considered, so they kind of put the taste back in it. This makes it where people in the urban gardens can have plants that are half the size of a normal plant, but they have all the flavor and all that, because it's a simple one gene. It's genetic, it's just one gene that affects that size. So you can pass it off, and it's a recessive gene. So if you take it and breed it, it will keep that gene unless you introduce new genes. It will breed true. And what they've done is they take several different types of, all different flavors, shapes, sizes of tomatoes, and it reduces it down to where you can have, now they're probably not gonna be as big as your regular ones, because anytime you put something in the container, not as big, but they're really good sized slicing tomatoes you could grow in a 5-gallon bucket. I do recommend his book. He done a very good job of reading his book. He does a very good job explaining some of the varieties that's in there. Like I say, I think it's a very good deal. It does work. If you're trying to grow something in some tomatoes in a small area, that's the way to go. Now you can also go to micro tomatoes. It's something else that they come up with. It's a more complex gene. And the fact they're so small, we're probably only gonna get cherry tomatoes off of it, because, if you got a tomato that's this tall, now this isn't tomato, I know that, but they get about this tall. I grow them in that pot right there. And how can you have a great big 8-ounce, 10-ounce tomato plant that's that big? You can have several small cherry tomatoes, but the big ones, I don't think we're ever gonna get there. But anyway, that's been a good trend. That's good that happened. I recommend it. I grow some. My only problem is I grow a lot of the regular sized tomatoes out in the garden. I do grow some up here just so they'll be handy. Sometimes I neglect them, but I'm a very big proponent of the dwarf tomatoes. Number 9 is azomite. I know Grow Your Own Greens, he thinks the world of azomite, and I just put this as suspect. If you do not need micronutrients, it doesn't do any good to add more. If you don't need phosphorus, I'm gonna get that in later. If you don't need azomite, if you don't need those micronutrients, adding more doesn't help. They promise better plant health, they promise better taste. I bought some one time and I put it in different stuff, and I forgot which ones I did it in, and I couldn't tell the difference. Not necessarily a good test in a way, but in a way it's a good test, because I should have been able to tell. If it's that spectacular. If you want to buy it, buy it, I guess. I just don't know, even if you need those micronutrients, I would go with Micro Boost, which is something that Haas Tool sells, because it's really manufactured for that. All azomite is volcanic dust, I believe it is, or rock. I think it's volcanic dust, and Indians, they say, used to use it. Okay, maybe, but it's one of those, maybe it works, but I think that you'd be better off to spend it on something that's, if I'm concerned that I don't have micronutrients in something, I'll just use a complete fertilizer that has all your micronutrients in it. And so that's kind of how I feel about that. Number 10, square foot garden. This came out probably whenever raised beds started coming out. And Mel Bartholomew was the guy that wrote the book on square foot garden. I like the concept. I think the concept's well, because basically what you're going to do with it is you're going to put out a grid system, and I tell you, put a grid system, engineers eat it up, and you plant everything in that grid. But I like the concept. My problem is they seem to to really bunch those plants up really tight, because when you read on the back of a seed packet, it's going to say you need to plant plants like 6 inches apart along the row and 24 inches. And the rows need to be 24, 30 inches apart, 18 inches apart, 12 inches apart, whatever they're going to say. But the reason they say that is because they're thinking of in-ground gardening, and you need something to be able to walk up and down so you can harvest, pull weeds, put down fertilizer, water. You know, you're going to have to get up and down it. Well, with the raised bed, you're using your pathways for that, and you don't have to get in the bed, so you can plant them really what it says to me of what that pack says between plants. They're what I would see a lot of people do, and I see a lot of YouTubers do this. They have it all laid out. They're planting all their little nice little plants there, and it looks really pretty. But I never see them go back and say, okay, 2 months later, what does that garden look like? Because I think it's going to be a blown up jungle. I think so. Everything's going to blow up really big. They're saying 1 plant per, for like peppers or tomatoes, 1 square foot's enough. I don't think it is. I think you almost need 1 yard. But the other stuff like carrots and beans and stuff, it works pretty good. I just would be a little bit suspect if you're in a high humidity area. You might need to space them out a little further. But yeah, it's a true concept. You don't need to put the rows necessarily in a raised bed. You can plant them in a grid method. Now, some people go to all kinds of extremes to lay down wires and lines and all that. They've even got a little deal you can put that can, you know, how many seeds you want per square foot. Okay, I think it's taken a bit far, but if you're an engineer, it's probably not. Does it work? You bet. It works. It's a good system. But, you know, I do a modified version of it. But, you know, it is a good thing to consider. Number 11, bloom buster fertilizers. Okay, this is where you go buy this fertilizer, and it's got like it has a lot of phosphorus, because you need phosphorus to blooms, and if you put out all this phosphorus, you can get more blooms. I was doing a talk at a Master Gardener's course, and I mentioned this, that the bloom buster stuff does not work. And there was a little black lady sitting over there, and she gave me that look. And I smiled and I said, "You don't believe me, do you?" "No, sir, I don't. I had some flowers, they never would bloom. I started using bloom buster fertilizer, and they bloom now." And I kind of laughed and said, "What, you know, how many flowers?" "Well, I got just the 1 pot." I said, "Okay, that's fine. If it works for you, go for it, okay? I don't have a problem with that. You're not polluting your garden. You're not putting you're not putting on a 1,000 square foot garden." However, let me make a suggestion. If you ever get a couple of 2 or 3 of the pots with those flowers in it, try this. Take the bloom buster stuff, because what we tend to do is we will take that little spoon, or we'll usually use a teaspoon or a tablespoon of fertilizer, and we'll put it in that 2-gallon pot, 2-gallon watering can, and we will water our plants with it. That's our fertilizer. And when we use the bloom buster, we apply the same amount, right? But what it is that's right. If you apply less nitrogen, the plant's not going to grow as much, and it's going to start blooming. Now, if you're low on phosphorus, phosphorus definitely helps. But most people are not low on phosphorus, because compost has a lot of phosphorus in it, more than what you usually need. Most of your soils don't need phosphorus if you're in the black land countries or whatever. Now, ironically, in Jefferson County where I work, I don't live in Jefferson County, but where I work in Jefferson County, we do have low phosphorus levels. But most people, Central Texas and that area, and if you go up in the Midwest, most of those people have plenty of phosphorus in their soils. And adding more phosphorus does not give you more blooms. Once you get to that level that you got the right amount of phosphorus, adding more phosphorus does not help. However, what people tend to do is they over-apply nitrogen, and rather than just cutting back on the amount of fertilizer they put on it, they go with bloom busters that cuts down their nitrogen, and that's what makes it work. It appears to work, but in reality, I don't really think it does. I'm gonna put this on the suspect part of it, because if you're low on phosphorus, yeah, it would get you up to a higher level really quickly, but most of the time it's just you apply too much phosphorus and you apply too much nitrogen. And that really comes into flowering plants. It comes into if you're trying to grow beans, peas, sweet potatoes, figs. They go vegetative on you, and they want to all produce a lot of vegetative growth and not fruit. So Instead of going with bloom busters, you're probably better off just cut back on the nitrogen and you'll have the same results and you will save money that way. The 12th, number 12, we're finally getting to the end of this. My son, I think, is glad, is pruning peppers. Everybody likes to prune things. And this is the one that I'm going to say I really don't know. But I do think this. Number one, if you want to prune your peppers, you can prune them, but realize one thing, when you prune your peppers, it's going to delay your first harvest. Number two, commercial people do not prune their peppers. They just don't do it. They think it's, you know, I had a guy one time, they was interviewing him on the YouTubes, and he said, no, we don't do that because it's going to delay our harvest. If you're up north, that's a very big thing. If you're down south, it could be. Because most years, if you have a delayed harvest of like bell peppers, you may not make a harvest because it gets hot here. And then you have to pull them through the summer and then they'll start making it in the fall. Now, this year I've been wrong on that. I've heard people up around Dallas say they made phenomenal amounts of peppers. And I made a couple of guesses to why, and they said I was wrong. So now I was, because I don't know everything. But on the pruning peppers, I'm thinking if you want a more continuous harvest, I would not prune them. If you got something that really tends to get long and lanky, such as your banana peppers, you might want to prune some of them and not prune the other ones, because that way the ones you don't prune will make sooner, and the ones that you do prune may make a bigger harvest. It makes a bushier plant, and it does give more opportunity for peppers, but if the conditions aren't right for it to set the peppers, then that doesn't do you any good. So it's going to delay the harvest, and that may or may not affect you. The jury's still out on that, and I've kind of wanted to try that, but there's a lot of variability on pepper plants, and I've got pepper plants out there now that I planted, and I see a lot of variability, and I didn't prune any of them. But I see some of them make really good, some of them got a few. I don't know. It'd have to be something that you have to plant the same variety, and that would be only consistent for that variety. And I usually don't see people doing that. I've seen a couple of people trying like 3 or 4, which I'm not sure if that's going to give you any consistent data, but at least it's something. The problem I have with most people is they're saying, I'm going to prune all my peppers and see if it works. Well, you don't have a control. Prune half, don't prune the other half, and see, you know, that would be something that'd be interesting. If you've done that, let me know, because that's one I put on here that I'm just curious myself, because it makes sense. And the commercial people don't do it, but the commercial people may not do it because they want an earlier harvest. Because in that vegetable market, sometimes if you got the first harvest, it may be a bumper crop, make a lot of money on it. And if you're 2 weeks late, they plow it under because no one wants to buy it. So some of your vegetable crops are that way. So you can't say, hey, the commercial people aren't doing it, so it don't work. It might work in a garden situation. The other problem might be that you would have to train people. It would be added labor costs, so they may, you know, or they may just be slow to do it. They may not have thought about it as much and haven't done the research behind it. But pruning peppers is one that, you know, it makes sense. May or may not work. I think over the next 10 years or so, I think enough people is going to try it. I think it's either going to fizzle out. Now, some people's always going to do it from now on, but I think where not it hits really mainstream and stays in mainstream, we're going to find out later. But anyway, if you disagree with me or agree with me, leave in the comments. If you have any other things you want me to discuss or talk about, any trends that you might want my opinion on, I'd be glad to either put it in a comment or make another video. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time.